digo mares tende insa ani toni to bi thal be go ya sta te tende to bi thal be le de chesa tende ki toni to bi thal kanji de chu chama ani rangje lo khond chu ni samno ta so yi shi ji ra ne pen khamba de ma so de den ro chang su chana digal nga khamba khaji jeb jara chesa tende yi samno ta so yi shi di ngara zo semji le longo le chai ba ji ta pang go ya de she du go ya de longo le chabe go ne ani nga zo khalsana ani ne emba tende ani so so gomni nya na chene ani tengin to ma saji ko ma.
So with this, we conclude our discussions on the root text of the three principal aspects composed by Tsongkhapa. Now, at this point, if we kind of summarize what we discussed in a nutshell, then think about it in this manner. First, we need to be able to look at the manner in which we go about our daily lives before we begin to talk about cultivating a spiritual practice. And if we begin to look at the normal way in which we approach and live our lives, then we begin to understand the importance of cultivating and developing a spiritual practice. Because when we look at it carefully, in our normal lives, we are always running after, attached to, and distracted by the fleeting pleasures, pleasures of samsara, and as a result of that, we begin to suffer. Even though in our hearts of hearts, we want happiness, but even though we want happiness, we actively accumulate the causes of suffering. And this comes from not being able to recognize suffering as suffering. So when we begin to realize this, then we begin to realize the importance of indeed recognizing the nature of our existence as one of suffering. And if we are able to contemplate on this, then we have the means through which we will be able to develop a sense of renunciation, which is a prerequisite to cultivate an effective spiritual practice. Now, this renunciation cannot be a superficial one. This renunciation must be a pure form of renunciation. So in order to ensure that this renunciation is not simply superficial, but pure in its nature, then we need to contemplate on the freedom and advantages that we are afforded as human beings to cultivate a spiritual practice, appreciate these opportunities that we have to cultivate a spiritual practice, then begin to contemplate on the different forms of suffering that we fail to recognize, and then most importantly, when we talked about the three forms of suffering, the first two, maybe they are quite easily recognizable. We should extend our efforts to recognize the third form of suffering, the pervasive conditioning, or the pervasive suffering of conditioning as a form of suffering. If we are able to do that, then we will be really able to develop a true sense of renunciation. Now, if we are able to develop such a true sense of renunciation, then we have now set forth on a spiritual path. And now, but even if we have cultivated such a true sense of renunciation, this in itself is not enough. We have to ensure that this true sense of renunciation is sustained by the awakening mind of bodhicitta, and we have to be able to generate such an awakening mind of bodhicitta that takes into account not only our selfish concerns, but the concerns and the welfare of all sentient beings, and to be able to look at them as our mothers and so forth. And now, this also in itself is not enough to cultivate an effective spiritual practice. We have to ensure that these two, renunciation that is sustained by awakening a mind of bodhicitta, is informed and infused with the wisdom of emptiness that realizes the nature of reality as it is. Yes.
Today the Thangpa Sara and Chiranzala deeper to a net in the Gresra. Today and Chiranzala Chigi Sanotasa Shido Rasas. Chichina Kashi that didn't Yami Kachitos and Lord Chesigre. Kashi deep bed the Legirochana Yaboris Samedo. Kashi that Chigia Tajundo, Lamada Chuyura. Chik Sanotasa Shido with this Rasas.
So then these are the foundational practices that one must cultivate along the spiritual path from a Buddhist perspective. And now with this, we have come to the end of our discussion on the three principal aspects of the path. And at this point, I want to hear from you, what was your impression studying a text like this and having a detailed discussion on it? Do you have the impression that maybe this is a little bit beyond me, that I would not be able to practice this? Or maybe are you encouraged to now practice all the more and try to develop your practice? What exactly is the impression that you get after studying a text like this?
I came to understand, not realize, but understand the very strength of being born as human being, with the freedom and advantages of being born as human being, which you have been talking about. And that motivates one further to walk on the path.
Jikta ngunsum du to la du zuda kija tharam bures ra inaya khodo do jura tinde do ji ni che che do yong is mixu karnes ra ani ta mili la di ani rinchen la di ka tsa chimbo yime ra di ani ta semla supu do chonsons ani tenju chobje ra di ani nganzo chue cha ge ani kogap tsa chimbo ji ba ra nuba ya tinde ji ba Dini Geshema Dawa Geshe sebu jane ra Koran la ni somna supu chonson loje yang shuchen bu che sons.
Teo dinde she Geshema ra chadan zan zan lula so tana shira chi mar cha chemi. Nga danda de shilol do de tata pugu na lo la danda. Nga te su lu de chu me juro thona ja. De kharche gor la zan san mi san ko tan da mre da. Ra dinde so yi ta 지 강요받아 초시받아 아니 수 대적 밀리데 지 칼로다 니가와다 근데 야 타워디 오네 거래 가와 공고 받지 임바 하고고다 소소소라 레나로 시다 가시 소소 취미죠 레나미죠 아니 가시게 뜻지부 쳐야 돼 가라나 나 파말라는 데 하면 돼 빙갈라는 데 하면 돼 지그 거유도 갈래 나랑 떼서 지에미죠 버리 코라코라 지 취미죠 돈이 든다 진짜 이디 가라 가지고 대적 밀리도 산타와이나 오늘 어디 취즈 따야지다 디 취미주지 레문도 사이게 로드 제기 디펜도 유사라.
So thank you, and I find it very important to talk about the precious nature of the human birth because when I visited some schools and had some interaction with students, I was really shocked that even at such young age some of these students really seem to struggle with their self-esteem with regards to their physical appearances and so forth. And as such, they kind of do not have any sense of self-worth, and as a result, they have low self-esteem, and they do not really see any purpose in their lives and so forth. So I find it, I was shocked. And as such, I find it very important to kind of appreciate the very precious nature of the human birth, this human vessel that we are born in, and the unique kind of opportunities, freedoms, advantages that we have with this human vessel. So unless and until we are able to kind of have a sense of appreciation about this human birth, then I think it is very difficult to develop a sense of contentment, to develop a sense of joy, because we will always struggle with finding purpose, with developing a sense of self-esteem, and so forth. Anyone else would, yes?
I mean, this is not And that sense of being in the middle, in the gray area, is giving me more motivation to try and understand it, try better, and maybe even walk the path.
Tene Quran sornang den de bu chung son sra. Di nga gi chune tusa mare la tene sam gi min do sra. Ine ta di changma khonsu chu bang ye go chhe so sam sa yung min do sra. Ta chima pharma do ji la tha di do sra. Pharma la tha de zamba ni ta shien gi ji loje do je ra. Jang ya shien ya de gi loje ni thile jang shu che ngo do.
네. 결혼 로 인디치레 차리갈라다 내가 저기 대변주 남는 로에 패키지 뭐라 수수 맞아로지 라차라 지 감바도 마서 내가 너도 신도 정말 두찬 대 디에도 지고 차고라 nindigal아 아니 대만 몰라야 대비나 야 포스를 랩제 이죠 라 지게 쳔드다 치마 남도 야고치 다 남자 미도 둥로로나 그 따져 터지지 치엠부 차여데 라주기 뉴모트스 마 빠야라 시르페도 마라 근데 템담래 데블디갈 라지 만징야 이촌에 요시그레 체리 돈다 가르데 가른 담래 요라 지게 이내 다다가 저기 나치 체오데갈 나 생주기 좋았다 뉴모트스한테 파 간데도 빵고 있네 라 딘데기리라 아니 지금 합자도 미스나로라 간데 치고 메제베 간데 치고 라상 간 이제 간데 딘데도 지로나 아니 단다기 맞자치라 디갈야 지대데 샤사디갈라 아니 캄바지야도 마소나 레다보라
So then it is very good if you are able to, if you do have, if you indeed feel inspired to kind of explore this further, because, and you should be able to now see that through that kind of inspiration that you have. Try to make time, find the, try to find the time as well as put in the effort to read further on this. And now when I say that you can begin to explore these further by reading up on them, then I want to stress at this point that reading a spiritual text is not the same as reading other forms of literature. Spirituality is a personal thing, so as such, it should not simply be an intellectual sort of exercise wherein you just read it. It should be the case that you, when you read it, you look at it in a manner in which you are trying to relate it to yourself, to see what are the things that I can change and transform within myself by reading on spiritual texts or reading these spiritual texts. Because that is, as we discussed at the start of the course, the purpose of spirituality from the Buddhist perspective, that we see spirituality as a process of transformation. So that should be the purpose, that should be the approach that you take towards reading spiritual literature. Questions? Anything else?
Could we talk more about the third form of suffering? How do we understand in our lives?
Tene Qurangi dhanda nganzu chapa dujigi dunye la jura. O ti eni nganzu gi mesigi jurim na la sura. Susu gi pa ta dewa doji tugura. O di khandes tugura eni kowa khande langore yas.
답변은 가서 동네 수를 제 가서 동네에도 인주도 쳐봤는데 라 답변은 동네기라 예반 좋아데 신제 돈도 신제라 이어스 가서 콘나이 갈 때기 지금 깜바도 라바도 차트는 그 동네들면서 와가 통도 알아 아니 코에 동네 다가도 코에게 동네들이야 아니 지게 다가도 남바 마인 케게 싫어 바이나래 아니 제 도줄에 예반 좋토고레스 라 다 챵받 되지기 동일라 되가라 안직 타바다 탄제 쳔비 고마 된대기 땡진 너마 두에게 두야래 안 된대기 칼로 딱 연주로 라고라 칼로 동게 슈 작고로 된대지랭이 봐줘도 저다 가르라나 가서 딜레가 챵받 되지기라네 토스즈는 만남에 받아 챵발라야다 디 가르라나 가라서 단데 사제 녀월림이 품보 라 사제 녀월림이 품보디 아니 쳔실 라완 바야니 안데 코고에 라 들어가서 저도 예반 조투고입니다 라 서서 지어되는 야스야스 랭고들라 아니 땅가들 탑이 타바 아니 베드 땡이 되어지 더루잖아 사블로드 뜻은 좋카보다 세트 들리질 샤기 레스라 지나기
So think about it in this manner. We have to understand it in the context of the three sufferings. So when we look at the first two types of suffering, for example, the suffering of pain, This is easily recognizable, not just for human beings, but even animals would be able to recognize this as a form of suffering. And as such, we do not want such form of suffering. We do not need to develop a sense of renunciation. We have no struggle in developing a sense of renunciation with regards to this. So similarly, the suffering of change too, it is also recognizable as a form of suffering, even though we might be confused at some point, but we are effectively able to recognize it as a form of suffering when it changes into a painful experience. So as such, we do not really have any kind of struggle to develop a sense of renunciation with regards to these two forms of suffering. Now the third form of suffering is the pervasive suffering of conditioning. So first we need to understand the manner in which it is coined as a term, pervasive and conditioning. So pervasive herein refers to the pervasive nature of that suffering. Pervasive in the sense that from the tip of samsara or top of samsara to the depths of hell, this kind of suffering conditions all realms of existence. And conditioning herein refers to the fact that our existence is conditioned by something. So our existence is conditioned, as we discussed, by karma and afflictions. And now when we say existence, what exactly do we mean? Existence herein refers to what we in Buddhism call our aggregates. Aggregates herein refers to the psycho-physical elements which make up who we are as a person. Mental aggregates, physical aggregates. So we say that the person is made out of 5 psycho-physical aggregates. So these 5 psycho-physical aggregates, if we are to understand it simply, we can look at it as our body, the mind-body complex. Now, this mind-body complex is conditioned. How does this mind-body complex come to be? What are its causes? The causes of this are karma and afflictions, right? So these causes in themselves are contaminated in the sense that these are conditioned by ignorance, afflictions, and as such, the actions that we undertake are also conditioned by ignorance and afflictions. So we are not able to recognize that this kind of physical body, in simple terms, as a form of suffering. And because there are moments wherein we do not feel pain, we do not feel pleasure. And we think that that's the natural state wherein we are free from suffering. But that almost equanimous state of existence is also must be understood from the Buddhist perspective as a form of suffering, because that neutral feeling is also conditioned by karma and afflictions.
How do afflictions lead to more suffering?
Nyomongi dungye chiwe jula khande jugeres.
Tena ganzo nyumo ganzo nasyo thala dusum la ora de cha shir chitange di tana lojo tiji madi kundi usunju thala pe traje uda ti mai ke di du de tsasna ani mege chubo tsunu ne ti na dekhi jena chitama phesa re sang dura koran zala ji ke khanji ta pena dinde khala nyomo di an dungi khanda siglara ra pena ganzo nyomo den de cha shena ti musundra ti pena ganzo kangi kharijena onen de cha ra 오늘 되살래도 다 지유 쓰레기와다 지 칼로 주미 지그 줬다와 될 때니라 오늘 대응함다와다 다 한데 딘데지래 레와 도도신데라 다 안되자 띠물는 머리 병원기라 먼저 지게 내가 노트 마무지 가는데 머리 병원기 때네 아니 노트 중고다 되게 강해 직제 아니 다 안되셔도 컨트롤을 된 가정 것에 더 쉬우 통우다 라 미지기 처럼 지금 담을 나와 있는 telapa 컬렌을 놓아 있는 되게 동해 마음이 통우다 이내 제랑한 졌단다 디차스나 아니 미기 주부 주는 마 다시 타는 데니 제페시 하고 레트라 지당아서 링아 있어고 야보 마다와 뜻수 삼아 유모 시행하진 땅할 때는 강이라들 마음이 실려
So herein, when we say that samsaric existence is conditioned by karma and afflictions, so as such, samsaric existence is in the nature of suffering. Now, try to think about it in this manner. First, what exactly do we mean by afflictions? Afflict means to disturb. So, afflictions refers to our disturbing emotions. And from the Buddhist perspective, we talk about 3 root afflictions, 3 such disturbing afflictions. Anger, attachment, and ignorance. So, with regards to the affliction of anger giving rise to suffering, I think that's quite evident. If someone speaks to you in a harsh tone, they are also acting out of anger. And if you retaliate to that out of anger, does it help the situation or does it give rise to further suffering? This is quite evident. Then similarly, attachment. Attachment. Now, what exactly do we mean by attachment? Attachment means that when we begin to superimpose qualities, desirability, appeal onto an object of our desire, and then exaggerate these qualities, then we become attached to these things. And now, if we look at it, many of our human problems, we understand, would you agree that many of our human problems come from a sense of greed? Greed comes from attachment. Yes? How? Greed. If you have to develop greed, you first have to develop attachment, desire. You have to be attached to what you want first, and greed is wanting more of it. Yes. And then now the most important, ignorance. In Buddhism we say that all the other afflictions are a derivative or are derived from ignorance. Ignorance simply means a misconception of reality. A misconception of reality as it is. So we know that in our lives, if we are ignorant about things, then we do things that are not quite correct, right? Yes. So Geshema was saying that we already discussed the first text. Now we will move on to the next text, and if we find the time, then we will also talk about what we in Buddhism call the ethical conduct of abiding, ethical conduct of restraining and engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions. And if we find the time to discuss this, then your question will be answered.
Dana pena nga zo enda ro sham tanda tisa risa nga zo thong shenpa thong ya yu ji kala na jekab hensu la maa jegda ra maa jegda kala digi jekab digi phagi la kara teka ina re gyono ina re membo ina re kanji chili chakpa chani kulu tsi raya ki tapsi tan chabi ngoli chikli sikda ra ya nyama koran zigi baru la maa chan ji shiwa nyama nga zo le di che re tari nga paa shigi lan 당와이 라 담든데 칼로 타가서 마가와지 요라 디 카레자 드네 지냐 디 양 투바제냐 가서 강게 마음이 스틱이다 파길레 투바제디니 도저데 이 바제 먼저 따니도 졸라이나래 디 된다 메세 부다 치데 시미다 바주데 드네 마음을 내지로 또 정말 수수를라나 차바다 당와다 라 디니 이제 간일래라나 머리 보고 몸병 라 창만냠도 되는 창되다 라 되게 그 알레다 캐머링이 막아서 이제 채나 등게 막이 막 차차래 다 단다야 모두 싸워래 가지고 미치 앞으로 찍고서는 뒤가게 들려면서 다 얘가 고조기 큰지지네 디 큰지지 밑에서 조사나 이게 막이 먹었다 되면 요라 얘만 가서 이제 채 단다 가서 이제 치고도 섬이 되게 아니 몸바디 라 휴지신이 아니 파카리 자가도 파카데 자가데 아니 파길레 데미게 미게 심제 마부질레 둥게테 츠 밀레하고 되게 말아요 츠 지그라 근데 이거 또 강이 마부지 테데 참 차단 모습 걸리다 봐
So now, now to kind of give you an example to make this clear, how afflictions give rise to suffering. Now let's pick an example. That appears as a clear form of suffering, an extreme form of suffering, conflicts between nations. Okay, so conflict, war between nations. So how exactly you would agree that this is a form of suffering? Yes. So how do wars and conflicts arise between nations? It could be the case that one country's leader becomes attached to the resources, to the land, to different things that another country has, and then begins to attack that country, and then war happens as a result of that, and then suffering ensues. 1. 2. Due to a sense of resentment between two countries based on historical conflicts and so forth, they are not able to let go of it, and at one point they begin to fight out of anger. Yes. Then thirdly, out of ignorance. Now this is very, very clear that many of the war that happens and the conflict happens because of a sense of ignorance. For example, religious fanaticism, ethnic resentment. It comes from a sense of ignorance, being totally deluded about reality, being misinformed about reality, about history, and then they begin to kind of harbor resentment, ill will towards each other, and then they engage in war. So these are the manner in which, at a large scale, suffering ensues as a result of afflictions. Yes.
Reda penangzo temnalo sura dewande je tu timu be dungeni le ngoba jugule ra dewaji de gore pena kara je kachi je nga je kapchi na te nyegi chola ma ro je nga je khatta so sano ro de ya pushul ta nga je khatta we na nga la keda do re ani nyegi membo du pa de je pusun so ba chi uchi de chore same disang wor de Tindi jungore la ni ngoma ra kisi ma ro ja na dosun kazu tangor di por mi kazu shuru sosugi wole ji mi mambo thong do gore ani sosugi mi na sosola maga ya usigra tangi ngote de akmo mundu ma je de ne ra te ye khorang yi sambal de nga keda chembo de mi da chembo de ngi membo de ya po chong je ko shamba gi jono no je sama ngara ra chu tindi sano ta yo ra ine ya dewa de je tim dungi ni lenga bajle de dele dungi char do sar ko ta gi samba na shi dewa je ra yo 라 근데 깔 커버다 제가 아니 가리네 지 마투도 주제네 깨체시 흘려지는 파샤 시대전 때문에 대화선이 받더라 징징는 가서 지 니모니모라 가대잖아 대화지 나야 왜메라
So now with this example, then we can go back to the point that we made in a previous discussion about how we fail to recognize suffering as suffering. And in the scriptures, it is said that we, as sentient beings, even though we do want happiness, we actively accumulate the causes of suffering. So this kind of example of war, conflict between countries, people, is a perfect example of this. Even though we do desire happiness, or when someone wages war on a country or a people, what do they do, or what kind of thoughts do they have when they wage war? They are motivated by a sense of being victorious, gaining something for themselves, and then they think that will afford them some sense of happiness. But when, in effect, when they wage that war, it brings more suffering, not just for themselves, but for others too. So this is the manner in which we need to understand it, that even though we do desire happiness, we actively accumulate or keep accumulating the causes of suffering.
pena ngara zugin dushe shana karashana susu dusun jingde ra 근데 아니 pena ngara zu ne da nebara jila pe shawa na Garazo pene tusungi pene kaduina ma nende ra tende le da nyomon tende ko angi ga man ba chingde ra tende chingde de gala ta 아니 다 딜레바 타요 타도지 가르도 가서 장서지 시 담보 시에 치고다 시에 받잠지 들로 시에 받잠지다 고아 르드라 받잠지 많이 봐다 니레 라렌 따야 칼레 카시르 라 근데 가서 래 가시치 뭐 라레세 이투발이요 라 딘데위데 담보 가서 마시에 받데 시에 받지 시에 차디가라 안디가라 산노다 산노다미가라 디갈 강게지 튀우디가라 따따 돈에 치투버지 냠네 치고야 돼 뺏기심보다 라 배나 가서 미 네바지나 다 암지들로 두고라 다 암지게 람데로치 아니 저런 디 마사 디사 메 따따사 치코만에 그 사고이나 가는 따따 러비어 다 콜 지틴테라 라 다컴바 어디가라 하 고철다 가르치고요메 가르치 마고요메 참 하고 이내야 안지기 뒤샤지디 니마다 딜로 어디나 라 라레다 사고야 남지 암지기 마젤에 젤에 참 나 방랑시에 마제체 탭들로 어디나 팽이르베스라 팽지라 빠sam지네 네바타라 팽지람라 제시 무시와라 있습니다. 진짜 가서 10번째 로투번째기 되게 말해서 다디나로라 안지기 가르스라는 딱딱딱 뒤수 라 들을 사고야. 가야 마젤라나 저런 빵거야 나서들 때문에 아니 빵거야나 디 아니 카티 사니 줘야 되는데 당가 안지기 마사라서 가 사이메는 바깥으로 라 딘데지고라 당가 저변은 차단 모선으로 째운들가라 딜라 독다 따다치 가서 드라드 마소는 바카티 가서 난두만 제야 나오마라 소소의 뉴모다 데차다 컨트롤인데 찌석이 시지레 온들가라 딜레 마초지 딜로 마루아지 티마 까고는 카투마 까투니데 당원에 파우도 드라 딘데지 가서 저거야 계속
So now, when we talk about the afflictions, it is important to first realize that we all have these afflictions within ourselves, and all our actions are conditioned by these afflictions. So as such, from the Buddhist perspective, we refer to these afflictions as poisons, the three poisons of anger, attachment, and ignorance. Now, as someone who consumes poison becomes sick, then similarly, when we are influenced and consumed by these afflictions, we are indeed sick. We become disturbed, and our actions, thoughts, speech, behavior reflects this, that we are disturbed, and this results in suffering. Now, keeping with the same analogy, that if you are sick and you go to a doctor, and then the doctor makes a diagnosis after checking everything, and then the doctor makes a prescription, offers you guidance as to how you need to take care of yourselves. Now you would understand everything that the doctor says. The prescription is in your hand. The doctor says, don't eat this kind of food, try to exercise more, and all this. And you would understand it perfectly. But whether or not you get well depends on if you follow the instructions of the doctor. This is one's own responsibility, that you have to take the medicines on time, you have to exercise from time to time, and if the doctor places some dietary restrictions, then you have to follow that too. You should be able to say no to foods that you should avoid. This is true, and this ensures whether you become healthy again or not. So similarly, with regards to the three poisons of anger, attachment, and ignorance, as we study all these scriptural texts, we attend teachings, we understand it now, that indeed we become disturbed, our actions become influenced by this, and as a result of which we begin to suffer. We will understand it, that this is indeed the case. Now, we need to practice. This is the most difficult thing. And as it is with the case of the doctor making a prescription and the patient, it is the responsibility of the patient to kind of follow the instructions of the doctor. Then similarly, it is the responsibility of the practitioner to really inculcate and cultivate their practice. That when anger arises, we should be able to develop a sense of restraint, knowing that this is not beneficial to ourselves as well as to others, and that this will give rise to further suffering. So this is the task of a practitioner, not just to understand the teachings, but to practice them in their daily lives.
Yes, that to mo de ani suje che ani ya wo de thura.
So we will break here and pick up the questions in the next session.